Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
To the assignment questions. What is meant by political system? We did talk about it in the start of the chapter. Now the political institutions constitute the political system. So basically the political system is something in order to enforce laws, rules. The political system enjoys the monopoly of legitimate power and authority. The monopoly of legitimate power and authority is exercised in this sphere. Define monarchy, or what is monarchy? When you have one man's rule, or when you have the single person's rule, is known as the aspect of monarchy. Define democracy. It is the rule of people. It is the rule of the people and hence is known as the democracy. Moving on, distinguish between power and authority. When you distinguish between power and authority, there are certain aspects that we take into consideration, talking about what is legitimate. If your power is legitimate, if your authority is legitimate, how power and authority have their, when power is legitimate, power is legitimate, you have the authority, or you get the authority, or it becomes rather authority, and you may describe it or you may give an example of the robber and the policeman or the policeman and explain this concept, wherein they're talking about the coercive power, they're talking about the characterizes, how it characterizes the relationship. It talks about how is power different from authority. What distinguishes these two is the legitimacy, right? I said, the power is something which is, whether the exercise of the power is legitimate or not. If you have the legitimate power, if you have the legitimacy over the power, that is only when it becomes authority, else power can be exercised by each and every person present. Distinguish between monarchy and democracy. We have just talked about monarchy and democracy as one markers. You may talk about it elaboratively, talking about the different types of democracy, talking about the different types of monarchy, how monarchy is something at times which has a role to play in the governance. At times, like in case of Great Britain, it does not have a role to play in the governance. And, how in case of democracy, it is how there is direct democracy, there's indirect democracy. What are the meanings of the direct and the indirect democracy? If you want, I'll write it here. Here you'll talk about the, the monarchical setup, wherein the functioning, where there is interference in the functioning of, there is no interference in the functioning of the governance, and on the other hand, you have the proper interference in the functioning of the governance. There's monopoly in terms of the church. Herein, when you talk about the direct and the indirect democracy, and in the indirect democracy, you talk about the parliamentary and the presidential form of democracy. So this is what we had to discuss as the political system as a part of the social institutions. I hope this made sense. I hope this is clear to all of you and you were able to relate all of this, since we live that, since we have that aspect of the democratic setup, and you are able to answer the questions towards the end.